So a few things about Mudbox files. Number one, Mudbox files can get mighty big when you have many divisions and all sorts of stuff. The biggest I think I've seen so far is a Mudbox file that literally the file by itself minus textures was almost 2 gigs. So they get mighty beefy. That's one file. That it depends on what's going on. They don't normally get that big unless you have a lot of subdivisions, a lot of detail, and all that kind of stuff. But they can. Number two, work off of either an external drive or the drive. Try and stay away from working off of a USB on Mudbox files. Something about the way it writes, unless you have a super fast USB little flash drive, I've seen it take like, oh, it saves in like, 15 seconds if you're on your main drive, and on a USB drive, 15 minutes. So you have to really, it's easier to actually save on the desktop and then copy it over. Something of that nature. Just be careful of that. So, basically, as I just I'd stated while we were compressing some video, you work big to small. Don't try to rush to the smaller details. I'm showing you smaller details just because I want you guys to kind of see what's going on and some different techniques. But ideally, I would spend more time building up the silhouette and then the muscles and then going into smaller details. The last things you want to do are like the wrinkles and the little pores and finite details. You want to get everything else locked down first. So, having said that, if you look at the face structure that I have, I've defined the cheekbones more, the nose, the jawline, and you may have noticed I pulled the eyes out a little bit. So your eyeballs, the way they sit, your lids on top of them, they're obviously, your eyeballs are spherical. So you're going to get this sort of, even if you have receded eyes, you're going to get a little bit of this roundness coming out, right? So I've added that in. And later on, what I would plan on doing is actually cutting a hole open in the eyes where I would put an eyeball in. But for right now, let's just sculpt it inside of here. So I've added just this area here, smooth that out, for a representation of the eyes protruding. If you look at the side form, do you see that? Where I have them coming out a little bit. And I might just push this in a little bit because it's, you know what, let's grab the fall off, pick that first one. And now might be a good time to turn on steady stroke so I can actually get a little more control pushing in here. Kind of shape the eye a little. And understand this is just let me use my smooth tool, kind of even that off a little bit. This is just going to be a temporary, representation of it. I just wanted to kind of pull that in, and let me pull this in just a little bit right here, where the temple and the eye, right there. Yeah, that's good. So, watch how I do the eyelids. So I've got this here, familiar tool. I'm going to go to the sculpt. I'm going to use that edge stamp again. Oops, tone that down. There we go. And let me turn on steady stroke so I can get a much easier edge. So check this out. This is how I do my eyelids. and then come back the other way for the bottom eyelid. Do you see that? I might take this time to kind of bring the brow out just a little bit. Oh, jinkies. Make the brow just a little bit more pronounced. And you could see I could just start to shape that out a little bit. Now if I say, oops, the eyes look like they're a little too far away, here's the awesome thing with the grab tool is I can literally just pull them in more. Adding some of the lids here. It's also a good time to go in and just kind of accentuate just a little bit the skull itself. There may be times where you want to do something like, oh, I want to put boots on him. Now I could model out boots in Maya, bring them in, and then, you know, UV map him, texture him, that kind of stuff. Or I could, maybe it's all a part of the same form. And you have a brush called the freeze brush. Check this out. So I'm going to use the freeze brush. I'm going to crank it up to 100%. And watch what it does. So as I paint on it, you see I'm painting blue. And what it's doing is it's freezing the geometry itself. So I'm going to paint where I would expect I want the boots to be, right? And literally I'm going to paint them bluish, and you're going to see what I'm going to do with them in a second. And don't forget underneath his feet. And as I work up to the top, how high do I want the boots to be? Go up those calves. And as I get to the top, then I would tighten it up, and Control left mouse button will unfreeze this area. So I'm going to try and get a nice straighter line. Oops. Like so. If I wanted there to be like, you know, that little special kind of deal like this. And I could even do something like this. Check this out. If I hit Control and go here, let me actually increase you. Shrink you down to about there. So I have this. You see that? This pattern here. Now, watch what happens when I do this. Let me, actually, it's just, I'm going to go to Edit, Invert Freeze, and now everything is frozen but that area. And now if I do something like the bulge tool, and just go across that, do you see what's happening? It's actually popping just that area out for my boots and leaving the rest of it alone. Turn on you, crank you up just a wee bit. And then I could even go in, say sculpt, and then do that same. And start to get those details that I wanted in. If the subdivisions were higher, I could even go, oops, opposite way, around here and get a much smoother, but you get the idea. I'm just trying to show you some different techniques. And then you could even go in and say, oh yeah, there's supposed to be a part that goes across here. And then I'd go, and then there's a part that's like this. See? And just start to detail that out. Or is it more like this? But you see what I mean? Where I can get just really quick these details that are in there. And once I have it down the way I want it, oops, wrong way. Then I could just edit, unfreeze all, and then I've got him with these boots on. And then I could just do a subdivide, clean it up, add some details, and eventually then I could go in, add another layer, subdivide it.
So if you keep all the changes you made for making the boots on a single layer, it would only be, you could like take the boots on and off.
Yep.
Sort of.
That's the benefit of using the layers.
Yeah.
Because if you find out, oops, I made a mistake, or I don't want that, or it's too much, let me page down just so you can see. So I'm going to go back, oops, to page, level 4. I can not only just turn them off and on, but I can actually go in and just make them less intense. You see that? So it gives me a lot more control if I separate things by layers rather than just putting everything all on itself. I could put belts on one, I could put armor on another, I could put damage on another, all those, all those things.
Is there a way to split up a layer? Say you had done some face detail and then you made your boots.
And then you like, oh, I want to... Good questions. The question is, what if you did more on one layer that you like half of it but not the other half, basically, right? You can mask layers. So that's this little guy right here. Looks like a little mask. So if I go in, this is my boots layer right here. And if I select that layer, if I click here, you see like, oh, I can add a new layer, new groups, make visible. But I can also just add, come on, where are you? You can literally add a mask to it. Oh, where is it? Hold on. Where did you move it? Well, hold on. There's another way. The mask tool down here. So if I go here and I'm on this layer, I can mask out, but it's not destroying it. Or control, bring it back in. This shows me where the mask is. So I could just mask like, oh, you know what? I want there to be a connection right there. And I want to be a connection right there. For whatever reason. That just shows where the mask is. You see what I mean? But if I don't like it, I can always either... That's another way of adding some details, just bringing back certain parts. Or I could just control F mouse, just bring the whole thing back. So you can have it and mask out a section, or you could duplicate, like mask it, duplicate that layer, mask out so that you can have controls where you can adjust the intensity of each area, you know?
I could see using that for if you have whatever object and then you want to have like an underneath layer that you could damage down.
Yes.
With physical.
No, yeah, you can, basically the possibilities are really only limited by the machine that you're on. Because of obviously the more layers and everything I do, the bigger, you know, the more RAM and processing it takes, right? So it does start to, yeah, you want to have a machine that's giving you a pretty good, you know, pretty good video card power and processing power of just holding on to the stuff and being able to draw it without going chug, 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 chug. I've gone up to, I think the highest I'll go up is level 7. Usually level 6 is enough. You know, anything else, there's other ways I can get those details, but level 6 is usually where I start. Like, if I go up right now, let's page up. Yeah, it's thinking. So I'm going to go, let's go to level 6 right now. And so I'm subdividing, going up to level 6. Hokey smoke. Beyond that, you're starting to get so right now it's at 8.5 million polygons. If I press W, you could see, yeah, there's a lot of detail. But what that basically means is that now if I go in and add certain details, I can go in, turn off the stamp, give myself a little point, turn down the intensity, but now I can start to add in, if I wanted to, little wrinkles and stuff literally to the mouth, because there's enough oops, okay. Now, part of it is just where that's at. So, you know, the smaller the brush, obviously, you're going to have more of an issue. Because even at that rate, it's still pretty, you know, pretty tiny. Like, you know, you'd have to get even denser if you wanted that. But there's another way of doing it, which would be, I would make a, when I start texturing, you can literally make a bump map. And then you can add details through the bump. Now, if I wanted details in the sculpt for the normal map, check this out. Here's where the fun really kicks in, where I can use like my stamp tool. And either I could stamp details like this. Check it out. Let me zoom in, turn off steady stroke. See that? Me adding texture to them. That works out really well. Look at that. So if I actually add some, let's randomize that. And let's increase, yeah, let's increase stamp spacing. Look at that. Ew, grody. Or if I hit Control, I can push it inward. This is where we could start to like texture the clothing, texture the skin. You can bring in your own images. It's value based. So whatever image I'd bring in is going to start to add that. But look how you can start to get these nice little skin details and not have it look ridiculously smooth. I can also go in, if I were painting it, and even add, let's see, if I choose that, do not randomize, follow the path. Look. See that? So you can really start to, you know, detail some stuff out. Now, what you guys are going to do if you're painting in substance, you can paint in like Photoshop and stuff, it's just a lot easier to use either Mudbox or Substance. If you go to Substance, I want to show you something. Where is it? Substance Source, I believe it is. No, not Source. Substance Share. Come on, do it. Here we go. So in Substance Share, there are meshes you can download as well to texture, and you could even do them in Mudbox if you want to, but Hans is a good one. And he has like the clothing and stuff. There's, you know, this cute little guy here. This character. Now, I would suggest using something with a humanoid head, but if you do like, and there they even have this one, you know, that's in there. I also believe, oops, not that one. Here we go. So I uploaded a bunch of those characters. The Hans character, gas mask, the creatures from here, so you can also get them there. But I would definitely say, like, going in and so you either have that option, or like I said, just go into Mudbox and do like a quick sculpt. Like if you took this guy in, and then I could show you later on how to punch the eyes out and then put eyeballs in and then texture it, and you just wanted to focus on that, and we could go over that. And that would actually work out pretty well, and it wouldn't take too much. Now, what would happen, though, is this guy, he's 8 million, you know, 8 million polygons. That's a bit much to go in and try and texture and stuff, and no program is going to like that. So we'd have to export out the normal maps. So just so you could kind of see, if I had this, hold on, let me increase stamp spacing, so these are more spread out, randomize them. Yeah, that'll work. So let's say he's an alien, right? We're adding these details in. See? And we wanted these details in there. Now you might notice though, as I put these on, I might want them stronger than what they are, right? And I could still do that. There's an option called Amplify. There's a brush called Amplify that if I go across stuff, you see it actually intensifies the details. You just have to be careful because it will kind of start to change the object a bit, but see how it's actually doing that? Just like if I went here, it's going to intensify that, but within reason. So anywhere there's a detail, I can go across it to kind of accentuate that detail. But let's say this is a high res. If I page down, way down, Level 2 or level 1 is probably the one that you'd want to bring in to your to Maya, right? And you see how much lower res this is. So if I wanted to make a normal map / bump map and convert it so I could bring in that low res, let me show you how that works. I'm going to page back up to the highest level of detail. As it's thinking. Oh, and that reminds me, there's one other thing I wanted to show you. But use it carefully. It's a great power that can go horribly wrong. This new version of Mudbox, before I do the export of the normal map, comes with a brand new feature that is freaking awesome. But you have to be really careful if you use it. I almost shudder to show it to you. It's called dynamic tessellation. So normally, you see how I keep on having to subdivide the whole model to get certain details. Well, sometimes you actually don't want to do that. You just need it to be more dense in certain areas. This is really good if you are going to be retopologizing the model. In other words, remodeling it so that you can have a cleaner version and then transfer the normal maps and stuff to that lower res cleaner version that you would retopologize. Don't do it, but I just want to show you right now before you go nuts, because if you do it wrong, it can crash. Mudbox just dies. Every brush, if I go in right now and try to add details to it, let me just turn that stamp off. And actually, it would work better if I page down and show you. Because that will make a little more sense. Yeah, let's go to level 3. So you saw how jaggedy level 3 was, right? So if I go into level 3 and I try to use, make a, oh, there. Let's increase you. You see how it's all, you know, it's not clean, right? And that's because there's not enough wireframe here. Now, ooh, I haven't tried this with multiple sculpting layers going back, so let me save before I try this, because I don't know what the results are going to be. Yeah, that might be really weird. It may jack it totally. We'll find out. I've saved the file. When you select a sculpt, it may not do it because I have these extra sculpt layers on, which kind of defeat the purpose of it. And I go to paint, it's going to say this. The selected mesh cannot be tessellated as it contains at least one of the following. Higher subdivision levels, yeah, that's those. Non-manifold, non-triangular faces, sculpt layers, or UVs. Yeah, I figured as much. So let's cancel that, turn you off. And I'm just going to temporarily open a brand new scene so you can see what dynamic tessellation is. So here's our little friend here. He has no sculpt layers. And if I try to get details now, you see it's like really like jaggedy. And if I go smaller, it's even worse, right? So if I turn on dynamic tessellation, this is their new thing, which is really awesome, and when I go to click and we just say, yes, generate a triangulated copy of the mesh to continue. So if you notice now, it's all triangulated. Now, it's a little better, but watch this. If I hold down the letter N, as in Nancy, and I move left to right, or right to left, it changes. If I go left to right, it makes it tessellate less. Let me turn on wireframe so you can see. If I go right to left and shrink this down, it's telling me how it's going to subdivide it. Don't go all the way over here. It will crash it. So we're just going to add just a few triangles within triangles. Now watch. You see that? So let me turn off stamp spacing. Do you see how much cleaner that is now? But look at how it tessellates just that area. So the benefit of it is that it allows me to add these details now, and if I go a little bit further, not much, you see I'm getting these details now that normally would have been really difficult for me without tessellating the entire model. The drawback is that you'll also notice my UVs are gone. So I would have to re-topologize this model, re-UV map the low res, do all that stuff. This is just for like I'm sculpting and getting details. It has a lot of benefits because I can actually go in, like I said, and just, oh, I want to add a seam now. Oops, what do we got? No, do not randomize. And no. But you can see what it's doing is depending on how I have it set. Look at that. Without having to adjust it, but you could see what it's doing there. So this is good for like free-form modeling when I know I'm going to be re-topologizing the whole thing. But if you do it, you have to kind of start from scratch doing this. I mean, some of the benefits of it is that you can do stuff like this. If I use the grab tool and say grab silhouette, follow path, then I could do something weird like this. Check this out. Oops. Turn on tessellation. There we go. So I literally could kind of keep on going. And start to add these weird details to this character. If I say follow along a path, that's how it actually starts to curve and stuff as it's doing it. But this is like just for the free form stuff. So something to note, but don't worry about it for right now. But I wanted you to see that. If you see that little icon, can you see there's that little T? That means tessellation is on. And you might have accidentally turned it on. And that will just prompt that little window that you saw. So for right now, I'm showing it because it's cool, but also if you see it pop up, know what it is and know how to turn it off. You go to that tool and then just shut it off inside of here. And then whatever you're doing is not going to tessellate anymore. But if you're just wanting to screw around and you have a powerful enough machine, by all means you can go in and just start to mess around with it. But back up to here, you know what? Let me show you guys at least how to start, like if you want to throw textures on in here, and then I'll show you how to export it out. So if I wanted to get this guy and I want to start texturing him in here, or I brought a model in, I'd go to my paint and I'd go to the paint tools and I could use paintbrush. You can always just hit reset to drop it back to normal. Always make sure to set it back to mirrored until you're ready to not use mirrored. But if I start to paint on it with the paintbrush, it's going to say, hey, stupid head, you don't have a layer to paint on. So this is where I would go in and decide, do I want to paint in the diffuse, which would be the color, the specular, the gloss, bump map, all that kind of stuff. So let's just call this one skin. And I would paint in the diffuse. And normally I would do like a 2K texture, so we've got that. And now, if I start painting, you see I can just paint directly on the model. See? Now where that's really cool is I can actually say, you know what? Right now he really doesn't have any color to him. This is just the default color of the material. So I'm going to flood him with a color. Scroll down, flood paint layer. So now that's the color he has. If I want it a little bit darker, I can. And now if I start to go in, I could add extra layers and start painting. But let me just show you. So we can go in here. Same thing, B and M for the brush size and M for the strength. But in my properties, I could change what color I want. Like so. I can adjust the intensity, but just doing it like this is not that great. You know, it's like it's too, it's not bad, but it's not great. You know, even if I lower it down, it's just too even. And skin isn't even. So this is where you'd go down to your stamps and you would start to paint in patterns. So if I actually, let me just show you by example, I'm going to pick something a little more of a reddish color so you can see it on the projector. And I start to, do you see that? I'm going to randomize it. And I start to add, do you see that? Build up some color variance. And if I increase the stamp spacing, so that you can see what stamp spacing does, if I crank this really high, just so you can see. Stamp spacing, do you see how it's spreading it out? So the wider the spacing, the more it spreads it out. The tighter it is, the less it spreads it out. This is randomizing all these properties. It's rotation of the stamp, the size, the contrast. So when I'm doing a pattern like that, I want to have it so that it's actually, you know, kind of spread out and start giving, if I have a texture reference, I'm going to start looking at how I would start to, where certain colors and stuff would be. And start to add those layers. And once I get those down, then I could do cool stuff like this. Like, oh, if I want veins. Let's crank that up. Let me make that darker. So you see how I'm like, how that would look like veins right there? So if it's very fair skin, and that's a leaf texture. Now I would start to separate these layers, and what I'd like to go is just, this is just basically making layers. I want to spend more time later on when we're in substance, right, of painting. So what I want you guys to do is, I'll post up a video. I mean, I'll start on it today, but I'll post up a video of how you guys can paint in substance. And because I do want to kind of go through that, but I definitely want you to start to, today, for this week, what you should think about is start gathering image references for skin, and ideas, and let me know in VoiceThread, are you going to use one of the models, or are you going to sculpt your own? And then tell me a little bit about it, tell everybody a little bit about it, and gather some reference images for skin, for stuff like that. And then we'll be able to go in, like this is an example of when you start texturing in Substance, where you could see freckles on the skin, makeup, hair, specularity going across, like showing moisture and oil on her skin, lipstick, and then just changing the lighting. But we'll be able to actually adjust that, and you can see Substance does a pretty good job, but it'll be nice to kind of go in and start to get that going. So your homework is going to be either pick the character or decide, do you want to sculpt? Yeah, it's actually not too bad. And then our ultimate goal is simply going to be then rendering out and looking at materials for it.